I'm sorry?
No. Hello, everyone. My name's Logan. I work for the Colorado Mountain Club, and I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It was kind of fun monitoring the chat. Usually we have, of course, the Colorado outdoor community, and tonight we have people from literally all over the States and world. So welcome to a Colorado Mountain Club virtual event. We've been doing a lot of these lately, of course, as I'm sure as outdoor enthusiasts, you've been tuning into some along the way. But just want to thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to the event tonight. We have a longtime friend of the CMC, Andrew Skurka, who usually does a lot of these kind of gear and backpacking focused clinics in person at the Colorado Mountain Club headquarters in Golden, Colorado. But obviously, with what's going on, we had to take it virtually. So we can't thank him enough for being here tonight and adapting to all the crazy current. Still giving us his amazing tips and resources. I'm not going to go into too much of his intro. I'm sure some of you in bio, I'm sure some of you already know it, and he'll cover a little bit of it. But yeah, big thanks to Andrew, and thank you all for being here, and a lot of you for donating to the Colorado Mountain Club, which of course now is really vital. Just like restaurants, nonprofits are getting hit really hard. So the Colorado Mountain Club is going to rely a lot on the donations raised tonight. And yeah, just, obviously everyone's in their own unique circumstances right now, but we have over 200 people on here tonight. If everyone just did $5, that's over $1,000 raised for the CMC as a nonprofit. So if you want, we can put Andrew's money where his mouth is, and you can kind of bet your donation on how valuable you think all the tips are tonight. And I bet you could feel like it's worth the $5 of admission. So definitely visit that email that you received from the Colorado Mountain Club with information on how to donate, or Venmo us at CMC Donations. That's at CMC Donations. That's it for me. Really excited to learn personally from Andrew. He's always a cool guy to chat with, and he's really great at adapting. So, we were kind of talking before this event about how, at least in Colorado, you guys all live all over the world. But in Colorado, we might have a shorter backpacking season because the restrictions due to COVID are, gradually lifting, and we're going to have to adapt as outdoor enthusiasts and backpackers to that. And also just to the fact that, we already started here in May and we've kind of been sheltered in place. So yeah, Andrew, you can take it away. Feel free to screen share at any time and share any resources with the gang. And thanks again, Andrew.
Okay, awesome, Logan. Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is actually my first sort of like virtual clinic, so I'm interested to see how this goes. I've done like hundreds of like in-person clinics, and I have probably, like many of you, been spending a lot more time on video calls recently. But this is the first sort of large audience for a tutorial like this. Logan, before you turn your microphone off. Can you tell the audience about any other virtual events that you guys have coming up?
Yeah, the best way to follow the Colorado Mountain Club for virtual events is definitely our Facebook page. But yeah, it's hard for me to keep up with it. We have trivia nights hosted. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Geeks Who Drink, but we have one of those Geeks Who Drink kind of trivia hosts that usually works at a bar. Of course, he's suffering during this time too, but he works for the Colorado Mountain Club's youth education program, and he does some really cool outdoor theme focused, usually for you Coloradans, to get the questions right. But same thing, everyone gets on a Zoom and we do some awesome outdoor themed trivia. We have similar to tonight, we have backpacking and camping cooking clinics that are virtual, sometimes done by chefs themselves, that just are an outdoor enthusiast. And yeah, so much more. We have Strava challenges, all sorts of things for people from Colorado and across the entire United States to take advantage of. And Andrew, I forgot to mention, I'm looking at my notes, a few Zoom housekeeping things I want to make sure I address. Due to the fact that we have 242 people now on this Zoom chat, if everyone could make sure that your video is muted, meaning your video screen is not on, that's going to help the bandwidth stay high for the clinic. And also, please keep your audio muted as well. Utilize the chat function with any questions, and Andrew will kind of open up mini Q&A sessions throughout the clinic if you have any detailed questions. So just try to honor those Zoom housekeepings for us tonight, and it'll all go smooth.
Okay, awesome, Logan. I'm actually kind of disappointed that all the video feeds just disappeared. It was kind of fun to see people in like their living rooms, and the father and the daughter who had just sat down. And I saw some familiar faces too. I think we have some of my guided trip alumni on this call. So, all right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen, and I can kind of walk you through what tonight is going to be about. Oops. And if you've been to one of my presentations before, like over the Colorado Mountain Club, some of it might sound familiar. But tonight we're going to be specifically focused on basically how to plan a backpacking trip. And during a lot of the clinics that I'll give, like the CMC, it's more focused on like gear and skills. But this one's going to be like specifically how to get ready for a trip. And we're particularly going to go through like 7 steps, and I think what my goal is to kind of give you like a framework for thinking about how to plan a trip. And this framework should be applicable to any location, any season, any backpacking style, any experience level. So again, it's sort of a framework, and if you just sort of work through these 7 steps, you'll be in good shape. I'm thinking this is going to run for 60 to 90 minutes, but I'm not entirely certain. So I think probably I have enough material for maybe 45 would be my guess, maybe 30. I don't know. I'm kind of winging it here. And then so a lot of the sort of a lot of the value is going to be on the conversation that we try to have. And so speaking of, let me kind of walk you through what we're going to try to do. So on the call tonight, we've got Joe McConaughey. Joe, and let's see if I can.
Hi there, guys.
Let me see if I can. Let's see. How do I stop sharing? I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that. Joe, why don't you go ahead and say hello? I think I can just bring you up here.
Yeah.
So, well, Joe, actually, let me introduce you first. So, Joe McConaughey, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. Joe's based out of Boston. You might know him as String Bean. A couple of years ago, he set the Appalachian Trail and Pacific Crest Trail speed records. One supported, the other self-supported. And Joe started guiding with me last year, and I immediately knew he was sort of a natural, and he's come on to join my guided trip program even more this year, and he's managing all the curriculum we do for our guided trips. We also recently launched an online planning course, and Joe is managing all of that. So I wanted Joe to get in on this call because I think he can add a lot of value to this conversation as well. And Joe is going to be also sort of culling all of the questions that come in. So if you have a question about the content that I'm presenting, you can go ahead and chat with Joe, and he can sort of grab those questions, and Joe and I will do like some breakout sessions and kind of have a conversation about some of the topics. You can also send him an email. You can, Hey Joe, your microphone is on. What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so we can see, I think, Andrew, if you go into if you go into file and then presentation mode, I think that'll give like the full screen view of your presentation. We can see the agenda with the 7 steps to plan a backpacking trip, 60 to 90 minutes, and then have a question. You can see my email at the bottom.
Okay.
So as Andrew mentioned, feel free to shoot me an email, and also in the chat function. I've seen a few people are using it. Oh, hi, Nicole. Nicole's on a trip with us, if that's Nicole I'm thinking of. And yeah, so ask us a question. I will, with Logan, we're going to capture those, and then we'll revisit some of those questions. And you can also follow up via email.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Joe. Joe, did I introduce you properly? Anything else you'd like to add?
I think you did a pretty good job.
Okay,
thank you.
All right. Okay, so Joe, you can, I'm sort of struggling to figure out what's on my screen. So you probably have like the whole presentation right now, right? Full screen presentation? Okay,
so you got the full screen presentation. Okay. And for someone who had a question, and as Andrew said, we'll be monitoring things in the chat. So just ask questions in the chat and we'll circle back to them.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Joe. Okay, so just so the audience has some context about my history and kind of where I'm coming at this from. So I'm 39 years old, right? 39, yeah. And in my 20s, I was like a dirtbag thru hiker, and I did like a lot of small trips, but I'm most well known for like these really big ones. So the C2C route in the upper left-hand corner was 7,775 miles. That took me 11 months. That was in 2004, 2005. The Great Western Loop was in 2007, and that was 6,875 miles. And then the Alaska Yukon Expedition was in 2010, and that was 4,700 miles. I think it's worth sort of pointing out these trips because you can imagine the logistics involved in planning these things. More recently, so in my 30s, I've become like this very serious backpacking guide. So I've kind of built a guiding program from scratch. This year we have 29 trips on the calendar. We have 244 clients, and the process of trying to teach other people how to backpack has really forced me to formalize a lot of my basically what I had learned firsthand, and it's given like trying to figure out how to succinctly convey information to people has been sort of a theme of running these trips. And we run trips all over the country. This year we're in Utah, we're in West Virginia, Colorado, California, Alaska. Am I missing one? I think that's it. 5 locations. So I've done like I plan a lot of trips every year. I think that's maybe the bottom line. And by the necessity of planning that many trips has forced me to figure out a way to do it really efficiently, and also to make sure that I'm doing it properly, not missing steps and forgetting things. So that's kind of where this framework comes from. So most of the presentation tonight, if you will, this is kind of be like sort of the narrative arc of the presentation. It's these 7 steps to plan a trip. And I'm going to go into detail with each one, so I don't want to necessarily talk about them a lot right now. But basically, like, define the parameters is like, it's kind of a where, when, who, why, how far, what trail, what route, where you're sort of trying to dial in at least, to to a good degree like what your actual plan is. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to research the conditions that you'll likely encounter given those trip parameters. Third thing, you select all your gear, then you plan your food, and then your references are going to be maps, guidebooks, data sheets. Sixth, sort of the sixth one is gaining skills and fitness for the itinerary. And then the final one is just like a final systems check just before you leave, of making sure that you have everything, making sure that you're sort of good to go. So let's kind of start going into there. Joe, is there anything that's come through so far that that's worth talking about?
The only question that has been asked is if we will be reposting this or if it's going to be shared afterwards. But for anyone who's leaving earlier, it will be on the CMC YouTube channel. It might be a day or two to get up, but that's where you can find a recording of this presentation.
Okay,
good.
Perfect.
You're good to go. Thank
you. All right. Okay, so let's talk about parameters. So when you start, this is the first step. The big three questions, it's this where, when, why. Remember, like, this reminds me of, like, I feel like I was in 5th grade when I learned about the W questions, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here. Start when you kind of first start thinking about a trip, try to get solid answers to this where, when, why. And then as time goes on, or maybe as part of the same process, you're going to need to dig a little bit deeper. You're going to figure out who's in your group, how many miles you're going to do per day, how many miles for the trip, or if it's if you're in really like a location with a lot of topographic relief, the better thing to use, the better measure to use is going to be vertical gain. You're also looking at like what trail or route. Take a look at emergency contacts, dig into the permit situation, and figure out your personal travel. And what you'll find is like, you'll start answering these questions, and like the answer to one question is going to influence another. So for example, you might start by saying, I'm going to hike the John Muir Trail in August, and I'm gonna try to do, this is gonna be my first through hike. And then you start digging into some of these other details, and you get to like permit, and then you dig into the permit details, and you're like, oh shoot, the permit season for the John Muir Trail for start dates that were in July, that was back in January, and there aren't any permits available anymore. So you might have to start, you kind of need to kind of go back and forth until all of the pieces kind of fit together. I want to talk in the big three. There's like the two obvious questions, like the where and when. That's pretty obvious. You might be wondering like why, and I think this is a really important thing to consider. If you've read like my book, The Ultimate Hiker's Gear Guide, or if you've been on the website at all, you probably have seen some conversation about this, where I talk about how backpacking is not like this one size fits all activity. There's sort of like two very distinct approaches to it. On one end of the spectrum, you have what I'll call like the backcountry camper, and this is very much like a rest and relaxation approach towards backpacking. You go in there with a lot of stuff. You don't hike in very far, and your activities are pretty camping centric. So it's 10:30 in the morning and you're still around the campfire, and you're going to fish, and maybe you're going to bring a big heavy camera and take lots of beautiful photos, or maybe maybe someone brings a guitar, or maybe you bring a case of beer, whatever it might be. The point is, you're going to carry a lot of stuff. You're maximizing your in-camp comfort, and you're not going very far. And the opposite end of the spectrum, and sort of the style that that suits me best and suits Joe best as well, is this. I've never really come up with a great way to define it, but it's maybe like a soundbite for it, but maybe something to the effect of like a multi-day hiker or an overnight hiker, where the the idea, it's maybe more of like an endurance athlete's approach towards backpacking. It's the emphasis on long days, a lot of time moving. Camp is really just like an 8 or 9 hour opportunity to recharge between all the fun stuff that happens when you're moving. And depending on your strategy, or depending on like your objective, your approach towards backpacking is going to be totally different. So like these backcountry campers, like, bring everything, like, by all means, just bring it all, it's fine. Whereas this style, like, you really need to be a little bit more disciplined about the stuff that is on your back. What you don't want to be, and I think it's worth pointing out too, what you don't want to be is you don't want to be this confused backpacker. I call these the campers by default, where they have one objective, they have an objective, and their style or the is inconsistent with that. So I ran into this guy years ago. He was on the John Muir Trail. I'm trying to through hike the John Muir Trail with that backpack. We saw him in September. He had like, you can see an ice axe, you can see a rope. he just was not packed properly for the trip that he was doing, and I think the experience was probably a lot more difficult for him than it needed to be. So that's the why. The final thing you're going to do with these, the sort of the parameters, what you're leading to. There's a couple things you can call it. But I think the best term for me is to call it a trip planner, where you're pulling together all of the details of your trip in a single document. So rather than all of your details of like your permit number and your starting trailhead and your the departure time for your plane, you're just going to drop all of this stuff into a document. And you can call it, like, I've called it a guidebook, I've called it a trip planner. And just for some context, so this is a screenshot from the guidebook that I had, my trip planner that I had for my Alaska Yukon expedition. This guidebook was 127 pages long, and it was just full of notes that I had accumulated during the process of researching this trip. So they were like, I dropped in conversations that I'd had with people. I dropped in route information that someone had sent me via email. There's all the hours of the post office in little towns like Yakutat, Alaska. So it was sort of this parking garage for all these details. It's also a really nice thing too to leave your emergency contacts. So I was able to leave this with my mom and my dad, and they had this, and they knew kind of where I was and had some information. Joe, do we have some questions that have come through yet?
We haven't had any questions. We've had 1 or 2 that have come through, but I think we'll probably talk about them later.
Okay. I think this is a good time to solicit questions. I need some questions, folks. It'd be useful to steer the conversation. So step number 2. So we've basically at this point you've defined the trip parameters for your trip. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to research the likely conditions. And the whole idea with researching likely conditions is that it allows you to plan properly based on on reality. So you're not going to go in there misprepared. You're not going to go in underprepared. You're not going to be overprepared. You don't have to throw things in your backpack at the last minute because just in case, or well, what if? You sort of, in the process of researching the conditions, you rule all of those things out, and you try to get a very good handle on what the experience is going to be. Some people would say, well, what kind of adventure is that if you're answering all the questions before you go? And my response to that is always that if you do a bunch of planning beforehand, the potential for adventure is even greater because you've ruled out all of or you sort of have addressed all of the knowns. And that allows you to just focus fully on the unknowns once you get out there. So when you're researching the conditions, sort of the sort of underlying reason here is because depending on where you go, the conditions are going to be totally different. So this is the Grand Canyon. It's hot, it's dry, there's lots of sun, there are no bugs. This is West Virginia and the Appalachians, and it's humid, it rains a lot. You don't get much sun. There are ticks. And then you go to Alaska and you're really remote and the weather can be really violent at any month of the year. And the footing is unlike anything you've ever seen. So depending on where you're going, like the conditions are extremely different, and the next step of this, the next step of planning your trip, the gear selection piece is going to be greatly influenced by the conditions that you're going to experience. So here's a bulleted list of the conditions that you need to research. So climate is going to be temperatures and precipitation. For temperatures, you can pull, like with pretty good accuracy, you can pull like the historical normals for like any location. And let me actually do that real quick. So let's see, it's the, hey Joe, are you able to see my screen? Like you're able to see me searching right now?
We can, yeah, we can see you searching on Google.
Okay, so in the US, the place to grab climate data is from the National Centers for Environmental Information. And their website it's not awesome, but we can kind of make it work. So what you're looking for this normals, this US normals data, 1981 to 2010. And go ahead and click on that. And this brings up just this huge number of places where you can pull data from. So if we zoom into Colorado, let's see, so that's the 10-mile range. Okay, so like I remember that there is I can get the data from
While you're looking around, Andrew, we had a few questions from William Guardia and Harlan Grossman. What is your recommended mapping software that you use?
We'll get there on number what is that, number like 5, but I can answer it quickly right now. So there are 2 platforms that work really well. One of them is CalTopo, and CalTopo's strength is desktop, and this is just super powerful. Let me just log in to show you some things. Super powerful mapping platform. This is like, if anyone remembers National Geographic Topo desktop software, CalTopo is like that, like on steroids. So it's an awesome tool. You can pull up all these different tiles. So in Colorado, let me actually just, so let's see, we'll go to my backyard, we'll go to the Indian Peaks. And here in the Indian Peaks, I like to use the Forest Service 2016 layers. They tend to be a little bit more updated than the USGS 7.5-minute quads. If I'm sort of curious, I was going like, I don't know, say I was going backcountry skiing or something, and I wanted to know maybe kind of where some of the avalanche paths are, I could pull this up, and I could also look at satellite data. And you'll see that there's this huge slide that happened a couple of years ago up in Upper Buchanan Creek. So there are lots of things that you can do with CalTopo. It's an awesome tool. I love it. I spend hours in this thing. The other platform that is really good is Gaia GPS. And Gaia's strength, it's basically the opposite. It's, ooh, this is not what I wanted. Gaia's strength is mostly its strength is a mobile app on a smartphone. They do have a desktop system as well, and the data from your online account or the data from your mobile account will sync to your desktop and vice versa. So that's the other tool that sort of the other mapping tool that I like. Joe, any other questions?
Yeah, I think a few people were interested on, there were a few like trip itinerary questions. A quick one is, do you have any kind of form template for your planning parameters?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me pull it up. So for the trip parameters, and Joe, we just created this for the planning course. So this isn't public yet. I should probably make it public. But this document here, this is, so we just started this online course, and I would love to be able to tell you that you could sign up, but we sold out of a session that started April 27th, and last night we sold out the session that starts June 1st. Joe and I aren't sure when the next session is going to be, but we're trying to get it online. It's a little bit tricky with us guiding during the summer, but but we'll kind of post that on the website. So here's sort of a template for a trip planner, and this is what we give the students in the online course. So these are just prompts here, and then they're expected to fill in their answers in these tables here. So this is like a where, when, who. This is some emergency contact, permanent information, personal travel, and then route info. Just either it can be like a link, or it can be like, I don't know, whatever they want to drop in there. If anyone's actually interested, so I mentioned before that my guidebook for the Alaska Yukon expedition was 127 pages. So this is just flipping through some pages to give you an idea about what I was putting in there. So like Koyuk is a small native village out in like the western coast. So I put in the post office hours. I had made a contact with the school principal. I dropped it in there. Some information on polar bears. So here's some information on there's like some shelters in the area. So I basically just dropping all of this information in there. And granted, like you might not have to do this. This trip was obviously like huge, and you taking an overnight or a short trip on, say, the Colorado Trail, it's a very different order of magnitude, but it gives you some idea about the potential of this trip planner system. So, Joe, other questions before I go back to the climate normals?
Yeah, I think this falls under trip planning. Is the other question I wanted to ask was, do you have any tips for screening outdoorsy friends to make sure you're compatible backpacking buddies, from Isabel Brower?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that the key thing, let's see, like I'm trying to think of like a way to like formalize the process. So obviously you have to get along. It's going to be like a similar temperament. Ideally similar level of fitness, but I think that the most important thing when you're planning a backpacking trip with other people is just making sure that everyone is on board with the same objective and the same style. Like if Joe and I are going to go out on a trip together, like probably we're going to put in like huge long days, lots of mileage, lots of vertical. We're not going to sleep that much, and not going to spend that much time in camp. In contrast, if I go out with my wife, it's going to be a sort of a more it's going to be a more fun, most people would say it's more fun experience. I'm going to bring a tent, and we're going to bring like lots of coffee, and we're going to bring better food. And both of those trips can be really successful, but the key thing I think is just making sure that you're on the same page before you start. Joe,
Great, that's
anything
awesome.
else?
I think we're good. We have 1,000,001 questions coming in, Andrew. So we could go down a rabbit hole, but let's keep moving.
Okay.
Just one thing, Andrew, real quick from some CMC. I'm getting some private messages. If you do make that template of trip planning public, it would be a great thing that I could include in a post-event email out to everyone that signed up.
Okay. I'm not sure I'll have to take a look. I'm not sure it's ready for prime time yet, but I'll definitely. Obviously, there's some interest in the document, so I'll try to put that on the not put it on the back burner. How's that? So, okay, so let's go back to these climate normals. And I just think this is a really important thing to know how to do. So as I mentioned before, like this website's a little wonky, so you have to learn to deal with it. But basically I found that there's a weather station at the Climax Mine. Here's like the dedicated station. And then so I select the year, and you select 2010, but it still is going to give you 30 years worth of data. And let's say I'm planning a trip in July. I pull this thing up, and it gives me, for July, it gives me the daytime high, the daytime low. So daytime high is 64, daytime low of 37. Then it gives me a chance of precip for that particular day. It also gives me, at the very bottom, this is the precip for the month. So it's only, that's actually surprising. It's only 2.5 inches of precip at the Climax Mine during the month of July. I would have thought it'd be a little bit more. So that gives you like an idea about what kind of precip you're going to be seeing if you're in that area. And you'll have to usually make some adjustments. So the Climax Mine is at 11,000 feet. If you're going to be higher or lower, you should make the assumption that for every 1,000, in Colorado, like every 1,000 feet that you go up or down is probably about 4 degrees. So, and also the higher elevations also get more moisture. Okay, so that's climate. Daylight is a simple how many hours, like the start of civil sunrise and the civil sunset. And then it's also good to know too what the moon cycle is. If the moon is going to be out during your trip, I'm sure some of you have found out the hard way too. The moon can feel like someone is shining a flashlight in your eyes all night long. So if you know that it's going to be a big full moon, maybe take some precautions, like bringing like a sleeping mask or something. Footing is you can kind of, there are 2 ways to answer that. There's like basically like is there going to be snow, and is there not going to, or is it going to be totally dry? And if it's going to be dry, then you're looking at like, okay, is it dirt? Is it rock? Is it granite slabs? Is it slick rock? Is it muddy? Is it wet? Is it slippery? Because if you get really into it, depending on the kind of footing you're going to encounter, your choice of footwear also changes. So I've got like probably have like 3 pairs of hiking shoes that I really like, and they all sort of excel in a different application. Vegetation, the key consideration here is like if you're going to be hiking on trail, you're mostly interested in what kind of like canopy or how much shade there's going to be. If you're hiking off trail, then you want to know like density, whether the brush like pushes back on you or whether it's easy to push through. Navigational aids refers to like trail signage, blazing, the obviousness of a footpath, whether a footpath is like well maintained, the visibility, like the topographic uniqueness of an area. So like Colorado is really topographically unique in comparison to like the Appalachians, where it's just sort of like a bunch of rolling hills that look all about the same. Sun exposure, that should be pretty obvious. In Colorado, it's almost always going to be high, at least during the summer. Water availability, basically like water quality, water frequency. Problematic wildlife, you're mostly just interested in bears and mini bears. The mini bears being those pesky rodents around camp, so like mice, squirrels, raccoons, rabbits, and other things that like to eat your food. Insects, mosquitoes, black flies, ticks. Remoteness is going to be, I think the best way to answer this is like, do you have cell reception? If you hike downhill, will you reach a road fairly quickly? How far away is the closest medical facility? Natural hazards is going to be like flash floods, avalanches, lightning. And then red tape is going to be any like pertinent regulations that affect your choices of like mostly gear. So like, do you need a bear canister? And are you able to, if you're expecting like a cold, wet trip, are you allowed to have fires? And other things like that. So as far as like the information, like your informational sources, here's sort of some ideas about where you can go. Maybe it'd be worth like grabbing a screenshot of this, but be creative with where you're getting your information from. Sometimes like it's a really authoritative resource, like the climate databases. Like you're not going to find a different opinion on what the average high and low temperatures are at the Climax mine in July. Whereas, if you talk to a backcountry office, you talk to a backcountry ranger, they're going to give you a little bit different information than maybe just a recreational backpacker who is in the area constantly. And then obviously with things like forums, online trip reports, the source of the information is also really important. You just kind of need to know, do you need to take the information with a grain of salt, or can you take it for its word?
And I think to add on to that, Andrew, from a question standpoint, is what are some of those go-to resources that you look at every time? A lot of people have had questions on where can I find info on water availability? What's the most reliable resource? What are kind of some of your go-tos?
Yeah, so I'm always looking at my maps. So let me go back to CalTopo. Just gives you an idea about like if I were interested in water availability. Suppose I was going to do the Pawnee Buchanan Loop, which the Pawnee Buchanan Loop is sort of it's one of those classic like front range itineraries. So I'll just draw it in red real quick. Okay, so you can start the Pawnee Buchanan Loop here at Lake Brainerd, and then you go over the shoulder of Mount Audubon, you drop down into like Coney Flats, you go over Buchanan Pass, which is 12,000 feet, you drop down to the confluence of Buchanan Creek and Cascade Creek, and then you come over Pawnee Pass at 12,000 feet, and you go back down the other side. So if I want to know about water availability, I would just start zooming in on this map, and I'd go like, okay, well, I'm going to leave the trailhead with full water bottles, and then it looks like, well, the trail doesn't cross. Look, it crosses a creek here. How many miles is that? That's 1, 2. So it crosses a creek within the first 3 miles, maybe 4 miles. More water here. Water, water, water. I walk along water for 4 miles here, and then walk along water for another 3 miles there. There's a lake here. So the conclusion on, at least in terms of water availability in the Pawnee Buchanan Loop, is that it's all over the place. So easy, done. It's a little bit of nuance. If I were going to do this trip in September, some of the water sources might be dried up. So for example, like I don't know if I would trust this water source in September, especially after a dry winter. But this is definitely going to have water still, and this one will too. Joe, what other questions about conditions?
Just unmuting myself. This is sort of related, sort of not related, but you spoke slightly on bear canisters. And I think people were just curious about a few different things. One straightforward question coming from Patricia. Are you still recommending that we sleep with our food in our tent?
Okay, so here's the, let's see. Maybe, but it's more nuanced than that. So here's the full tutorial. You can find it on my website, how to store and protect food from bears and mini bears. And I basically walk you through 5 different options. You can go with like permanent infrastructure. So that would be like a food locker that's like out there in the backcountry. You can use a portable canister. You can use a soft-sided like bear or rodent-resistant sack, like an earth sack. You could do a rodent hang, which like this photo here, this is a pretty good example of a rodent hang where like, a raccoon isn't going to be able to get to that, but obviously a bear could, but it's not something that you would use in bear habitat. And then your final option is you sleep with it. So I'm going to actually just point you to this post because I think it gives you all the nuance that you need.
And that has been, I just copied
Joe,
that into, yeah, I just copied that into the chat if anybody wants to save that. Don't look at it now because we'll continue moving on quickly, but to have it as a resource. Let's see. This is a kind of one you haven't quite touched on, coming from Douglas Bradford. Could you speak to your experience mailing gear and supplies? What gear do you prefer to ship versus fly with? And how do you select locations to ship to?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so that doesn't really even fall anywhere in here, but so I can give kind of the one-off answer that I like to carry on as much gear as I possibly can. So the only thing that I can't carry on would be a knife. I'm always sort of wary about taking tent stakes onto a plane. I just think that's probably a good thing to get hung up on at security. I've been able to get trekking poles on planes multiple times, but they need to be broken down and like tucked away. They can't just be like attached to the outside of your backpack. Obviously, you can't fly with canister fuel. Trying to think of some of the other things. So, you know, if things, the things that you can't fly with, like the things that you can't carry on, yeah, you can either put them in a, like I always fly Southwest, so I'll just check them. But you can also just buy them on site too. Not a big deal.
Yeah, I think that question extended a little bit, which maybe isn't right for this audience exactly, but maybe, I don't know if you have a quick kind of 101 on how you might identify like a resupply location on a backpacking trip.
Joe, how do you identify a resupply location?
Great question, Andrew. You know how to play tennis. So when I look at a resupply, and this maybe is more pertinent for backpackers or people who are doing sort of multi-day or multi-week trips where you have to make multiple itinerary stops. So whenever I look at a resupply, I try to identify something that's really easily accessible and doesn't require you to get off trail by a long distance. So if you're looking at something like the John Muir Trail, you know, there's a few trailheads that just require you to add an extra 15 miles to your adventure in order to get to that resupply location where you end up in a town. I prefer to bulk up and carry a little extra weight for something like that so that I don't have to add 15 extra miles on top of through hiking the 220 miles in the JMT. For something like the Appalachian Trail, there's a lot of trail towns. And so I'd always try to prioritize towns that you kind of go through or that are right off the trail. It's a lot easier to ship actually to businesses than to postal services because postal services have limited business hours and hours of operations, which is why I'll try to reach out to any backpacking hostels or even a hotel or even just a local business that might support the hiking community and ask them over the phone if they accept packages and how I should ship that to them.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Any other questions that we want to address now?
I think, just a real quick one. When looking at conditions, like how far back should we look to try to, like how far back should we look for historical data to try to make these kind of decisions?
Yeah, I think it depends on the condition. So like if I'm just going back to like the bulleted list here, most of the stuff doesn't change that much. So like, you know, sun exposure is the same in Colorado in 2020 as it was probably in 1960. Same thing with like water availability. Water availability might be, I don't know. I mean, if you're down like southern Utah and like, I mean, those springs change a little bit over time, but not usually that much. Most of the stuff doesn't change that much. The one thing that probably changes more than anything else is the wildlife thing, just because like with the advent of canisters and sort of like some bear policies that like for example, like we don't have a bear problem right now in the Indian Peaks Wilderness, but that could, in 10 years, I could see that being different. So, okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Then I'm going to share my screen. We can go back, and we'll keep running down this list. So this is a screenshot. You know, I showed earlier my trip planner, but the one so similar to the trip planner, I actually have another document where I do a conditions assessment, and let me actually pull that up. So maybe this too is something that I share at some point. So this conditions assessment, this is what we give the students in the planning course. You have got all these different conditions: climate, daylight, footing, water availability, and then I give them some prompts about what exactly they're looking for, and then they would report their findings. Always report your sources too, and that way you can go back if you find something different. It's nice to know where you get your information from. If you're going to do a through hike, you might have to do a couple of these conditions assessments. So especially a through hike that's like multiple months or that goes through like a lot of different ecosystems, you might kind of take a couple of points along the trail and do a conditions assessment for each one, because you will be facing a different set of conditions like if you were to do the Continental Divide Trail, for example. Okay, so let's move on. So this is number 3. So we're going to talk about gear. So we could totally go down the rabbit hole. We could go to 9:30 talking about gear. Gear is gear is really involved, especially if you're just getting started. This could be like a really expensive, really overwhelming part of planning for a trip. So let me give you like maybe 2 tools or maybe more than 2 tools. One tool is a gear list, and specifically start with a gear list template. We have over the years I've put together a gear list template that I think just works really well for a lot of different locations and different types of backpackers. It's instructive. So like someone who's going to hike the Appalachian Trail could use this gear list. Someone who's going to do the Colorado Trail could do this. Someone who's going to do like an overnight trip in the Grand Canyon could use this gear list, and sort of walks you through all of the different pieces of gear that you could use. It gives you some descriptions about what to look for. It gives you some links to some additional information. So if you start with a template like this, I think this is a good way to sort of stay focused and avoid making purchases that you don't need. Once you have done your gear list, it's really good to have it reviewed. So there's I'm not sure how many members of the audience are on Reddit Ultralight. So Reddit Ultralight is this great group. They're really knowledgeable. They're really willing to help out, and it's pretty often where you'll see someone post their gear list for a trip. I'm just trying to, if I scroll through long enough, I'll find one. And they're called shakedowns. Here's a shakedown for Montana. So this guy put his gear list up here. He dropped it in the lighter pack, which is another gear list template system. And then all these people are chiming in with suggestions. So this is a great thing to do. So put that gear list together, have it reviewed, and then you basically have a shopping list. So as far as like gear goes, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but how do you find good gear information? So the ideal thing when it comes to gear is finding someone who really knows what they're talking about. and I guess I laugh because I feel like I'm one of those people, but like there's a ton of information out there. And a lot of people who have like some knowledge about how to backpack, but maybe it's not the information that's best for you. They're sort of like lacking that perspective. So ideally find someone who really knows their stuff. And that could be, you might happen to like meet someone like at a Colorado Mountain Club event. You might find someone online or a community online. You might meet a sales associate at a really high-end retail store, like say like a Neptune Mountaineering, and that's a place where they really know what's going on. There are some reputable books out there as for gear. Actually, let's see. So my own book, it's this one. This is the 2nd edition. I'll pull it up real quick. I bet Amazon will give us some other recommendations too. So Ultimate Hiker's Gear Guide, this is my book. It still is super relevant. There's another good book out there. Let's see, it's Joe, what's Trauma's book? Yeah, here it is, Trail Tested. So Trauma's got a good book, Trail Tested, and then sort of the other classic book that goes in this group is Mike Clellan's Ultralight Backpacking Tips. This is worth having just for the illustrations alone. So those are 3 really good books for you. And then, so your last source of information is the internet, and it's a rabbit hole. You could spend just hours and hours and hours and hours researching, reading gear reviews, looking at gear lists. I think that it's, you know, it's awesome that there's so much information available. It can just be overwhelming though. I think that's, I see a lot of clients really struggle with just the volume of information that's out there. Joe, do you want to add anything about gear, or do we have questions to answer?
Yeah, I'd say I think I feel like if I start talking, then I'm just going to talk for the next 10 minutes and it'll be pointless because there's just so much you can talk about with gear. But I think there are two good questions, maybe three questions that that so far people have proposed. A good one to start, which a few people had questions about, is just generally if you have any tips on sort of packing your backpack, sort of in terms of accessibility. People have heard a few different ways to talk. This is coming from Jen and a few other people.
Yeah,
if you have any tips on packing.
I do. Here it is. So there's a video, and then there's a tutorial, written tutorial. I think I would just point you here rather than kind of walking you through it. Okay,
awesome.
What else do you have, Joe?
I'll post that in the chat.
Okay.
Also, have you had any, so Andrew, in his book, he has something called the Core 13, which is sort of his core 13 items any hiker should have and consider having. Someone had a question, since 2015, when you first kind of came up with the idea of the Core 13 items, has anything there changed, or do you look at it differently now at all?
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, for the audience who isn't familiar with the Core 13, so and there's some information on the blog about this too, but the basic idea is that you have 13 pieces of clothing, and you can mix and match them to create appropriate clothing systems for any set of 3-season conditions. So maybe you take 8 of these pieces and you go backpacking in Colorado, and maybe you take, say, 7 of them and go to the Grand Canyon in April, and then maybe you need like 11 of them to go to Alaska in September. But the point is, if you just kind of focus on collecting getting those 13 pieces, it's wonderfully simple. You can just mix and match them. And as far as the specific question, like if things have changed, so I came out with that series in 2015. It like carried my website traffic for years. And the only thing that I think needs a little bit of update. So I find I've kind of transitioned to I've gotten away from like lined running shorts, and I've actually prefer a dedicated pair of underwear and a dedicated pair of shorts. Seems to work best. But otherwise, that's like the only change. I think it still is like spot on. I don't think it's been rendered obsolete by technology at all.
And would you say John, at the very start of this, or sorry, Joe Armstrong had this question at the very beginning, do you really only bring one shirt?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, so yeah, I've got 3 different shirts to choose from. I have a short sleeve shirt, I have a long sleeve shirt, and then I have a bug shirt. So the short sleeve shirt is like hot weather in shaded environments, so like Appalachian Trail in July. The long sleeve shirt is going to be what I wear out west. It's mostly for sun protection, so it's still a lightweight material. So maybe like a Patagonia lightweight capilene shirt, long sleeve, maybe with a little bit of a collar. Even like a sun hood is really nice. And then the bug shirt is for buggy weather, so like Alaska in July, Wind River Range in July, the High Sierra in July. So so I'll wear the bug shirt during those months. But yeah, I just take one shirt with me, and then when it gets dirty, so like maybe say every other day, I wash it. I just dump it in a creek or a lake, and then I let it dry out a little bit, and then I put it on and usually yell, and then keep walking. Works great. The only time that I will carry like a second set of clothing is so I call this my sleeping clothes, and these are for like really wet, rainy environments where there's a high likelihood that I'll come into camp soaking wet just from because staying dry just it wasn't doable. And then it's really nice to be able to come into camp. You can take your wet clothes off, put your dry clothes on, and then sleep comfortably. And that extra, like, whatever it is, 8-12 ounces, it's worth its weight in gold if you get a good night's rest.
A few people have also had questions on like rain pants or fleece versus rain gear, or what type of rain gear we can look at.
I
I
don't
don't know
think
if
we
you want
want
to.
to go there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to.
I was gonna recommend for some of those questions. Andrew has a lot of content like that on his blog. If you literally, this is what I do whenever I don't know a question and want to pretend to be an expert on something. I type Andrew Skurka into Google, and then whatever the question that I have coming up, and he's probably written an article about it. So I would recommend doing that for some of these really specific questions, or looking at the gear guide is also a great resource for that.
Okay, Joe, we good to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, so let's move then on to food. So maybe I'll just give you some guidelines for food. I'm going to give you a range of calories. So here we can go to presentation mode. Somewhere between 18 and 22 ounces per day, assuming that you're carrying like reasonably calorically dense foods. So 125 calories per ounce, just to give you some context. So a pure carbohydrate or pure protein is going to be 100 calories per ounce, and a pure fat is going to be about 240 calories per ounce. So like, Joe, you've done some research on this. Can you rattle off some calories per ounce for different food items?
Oh yeah, like I think like walnuts are one of your go-tos, and I think they're in like the 220 range. Oreos are 125 calories per ounce. I think Pop-Tarts are also around like 130, 135 calorie per ounce.
Oh, that's surprising. I would have thought they'd be. It's all
I
that
know, I
carbohydrate.
was so
Yeah,
upset
they
when I
must.
found
They
out
must have
about
some fat.
Pop-Tarts.
They must have some fat in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought they were gonna be heavier, to be honest. And then I can't remember chips. I used to know off the back of my head,
Oh, I
but
can tell you that
go
Pringles are
for it.
150 calories an ounce.
Oh, you beat me. We should have it. We should have like a competition on this one. That'd be fun.
All right, so there's some guidelines for you. Now I give you a range, so 18 to 22 ounces, or like 2,250 calories to 2,750. So if you are, hear me out, if you're female, if you're older, if you have a small frame, if you're on a sort of casual backpacking trip, stick to the lower end of that range. If you're male, younger, more muscular, or just to have a bigger build, and if you're really like doing a really intense trip, then go to the high end of that range. And if you're going to get into backpacking, it's worth weighing your food before you go, and then coming back and figuring out how much you did or didn't eat. There's no sense in packing too much food, and obviously we also don't like to starve. And then once you get comfortable, like once you kind of figure out what you need, you can move away from these guidelines. So like I can tell you right now that 2750 for me, that's a little light for like one of my personal trips. I need more food than that. But I think this is a really good range. This is what we recommend to our clients, and I've actually have polled our clients after the trips and asked them if they had too much food, too little food, or if it was just right, and these numbers seem to work really well for them. I don't think we have much talking points. Now let's go there for a second. Okay, so as far as like food types go, just here's some options. So here's some Pringles. The key thing with Pringles, if you're going to pack Pringles, just make sure to you have to fill the entire bottom of the Ziploc bag, and then you pack them tight in your food bag. What else do I have? I've got some there's some M&Ms here. In the upper left photo, the bag that looks like it has corn nuts and granola and M&Ms in it. This is actually a really bad idea. So you might think that like by putting a lot of different things in a bag that you're gonna not get tired of it. But what happens is that basically that combination of flavors just becomes basically its own like uniform flavor, and you will get tired of that combination of foods. So I recommend like keeping things separate. So like honey mustard pretzels. It looks like I've got some Chips Ahoy cookies or something, some trail mix. So those are some ideas. And as far as breakfast and dinners, so everyone knows, like, you can buy like a freeze-dried meal. It's like a Mountain House. It costs $28 a pound. So what I like to do, let's see, where are they? So I've got a bunch of recipes on my website, specifically 6 breakfasts and 6 dinners. So for breakfast, we've got like a Southwest egg burrito. We've got a quick start cereal. We've got cheesy potatoes, coconut chia oatmeal. This is just the first page. And then for dinners, this dinner recipe right here, this beans and rice with fritters and cheese. This is like world famous. And I kid you not. It even has it has a YouTube review even. So 91 comments. That's pretty good. And then the other like big meal that a lot of people use is this peanut noodle recipe. That peanut sauce is good enough to use at home. In fact, I just had it last week. So that would be my recommendation. So just use these. You can use these recipes rather than having to buy freeze-dried like commercial meals. And obviously, there's a little bit of prep involved with this. So my recommendation to you is that when you're prepping these foods, prep like the summer's worth of food. So like this is probably like, I'm guessing that's probably like that's probably a summer's worth of peanut sauce in my mixer. So just do it all at once in that way, because it's kind of a nuisance to prep food. It's easier just to have it all sitting in a bin and you can just grab it and go. Joe, any questions about food?
Yeah, this is about food preparation, but we've had questions from Laura Melling and from Zach Sokol about alcohol stoves, canister stoves, and no stoves. What's your take on those?
So there's a bunch of information. Like I don't want to go like too much down the rabbit hole, but I think all of those stove systems are great for different types of users. So like personally on my solo trips, I use an alcohol stove. But on like late in the season, so like if I'm going to go like elk hunting in October, November here in Colorado, I bring a canister stove. And if I'm going backpacking with my wife, I'm going to bring a canister stove. A white gas stove. White gas stove is kind of the one stove that really doesn't have a place anymore. The one exception is if you're like doing some very remote trip where the only fuel you can get is like some sort of petrol product. And then as far as no cook, Joe, have you done no cook, and what's your opinion on it? I haven't gone there in 18 years.
Yeah, I did the AT 3 years ago on no cook. A few people asked about cold soaking. So a common strategy is cold soaking food, where you put water in dehydrated meals to kind of make it more palatable. I did full no stove, no cold soak on the Appalachian Trail when I did it. I actually find it really it's sort of like it's part of the process. I really enjoy it. I would eat like a stick of salami every day. I'd eat like a pound of trail mix every day. I'd eat a few bags of Fritos and Cheetos every day. So I think no stove is definitely doable, but you also have to maybe be a little psycho and crazy and really have a certain use in mind, like Andrew said, to be able to do something like that. It probably wouldn't be something I'd really recommend doing unless I was solo camping.
Hey, Joe, this is a good time to turn on your video and prove to everyone that you don't weigh 400 pounds after eating all of that food in a day.
That's true. It's real life. I say it a good healthy 162 and 6'4".
All right, should we keep on moving?
Yeah. Quick note from Max Tonks. What are your thoughts on dehydrating your own meals?
Oh, I don't get it. It's just so much work. So like you can, yeah, it's just so much work. I don't own a dehydrator. I don't dehydrate any food. It's definitely, if you buy dehydrated or freeze-dried food online, it's definitely more expensive. But I mean, the time involved in dehydrating your own food, it's just crazy. So I don't bother.
Awesome. Sweet. Let's move on.
Okay. All right, so we're back to our presentation. So let's move on to, okay, so one final thing about food. You are gonna have to as part of the food process, think about how you're gonna store your food overnight. And I've given you the link there, so I'm not gonna go into more detail. So let's talk about references. Here's what a complete sort of navigational kit looks like. So let me start on the far, let's see. Let's start with the Trails Illustrated map. So that is my overview map. It's a small scale map. It's great for trip planning, like beforehand. Joe, you knew I was going to throw an Odin photo in here, right?
For anyone who's not familiar, Odin is Andrew's cat that he posts multiple times about on Instagram.
My
all the time.
BFF. He gets more coverage than my wife does. So overview maps are great for route planning. You can just see a large amount of topographic area, but they're not great for navigating like in the field. So that's why on the left side here, I've got my large scale maps, and usually I'm going to use like a USG, like a 1 to 24,000 scale, which is going to be that USGS 7.5 minute, like classic gold standard map. To the right of the overview map, I've got my guidebook, and that can be either something you buy or something that you create on your own. Below the overview map and the guidebook, you see kind of that table. Those are data sheets, and I think I've got here's maybe a better, like a zoom in. And a data sheet is basically like a bare bones spreadsheet with key information. So like a trail junction at mile 6 at 70.8, the outlet of Helen Lake at mile 73, the Tuolumne Meadows Wilderness Center at mile 64, whatever it is, it's just sort of this bare bones reference. And if anyone has ever done like a lot of on-trail hiking, especially a through hike, you know how handy these data books are, because you do a lot of dead reckoning where it's like, okay, my next, there's a shelter, it's 3.5 miles away. That's going to take me 70 minutes to get there. So you just do a lot of dead reckoning. So what else is in my kit here? So if we go back, this is like all my equipment. So I've got a magnetic compass. I always carry like a writing tool. You need a watch. I use a GPS watch. As an endurance athlete, a GPS watch is like a revolutionary product. So I already own one, but just at least something that tells the time. I also include my smartphone as an essential piece of my navigation kit nowadays, and that's because you can use these GPS apps like Gaia, where I have the exact same map on my phone that I do printed out. I fire up my phone, it tells me exactly where I am. I can use my phone to take photos. It's entertainment at night. I use my phone to like type messages to my inReach, my satellite communicator. So I've already got my phone, and your smartphone will replace a dedicated handheld GPS. There's no reason nowadays really to take a handheld GPS. And then it's these plastic bags here. This is just how I store my paper. I've got two Ziploc bags. One has the materials that I'm using right now, and that is stored on the outside of my pack where I can easily access it. And the other Ziploc bag stays inside my pack, and that has all of my other paperwork. Joe, any questions on this?
Yeah, there's 3 general topics that I think have kind of surfaced. First, a few people have just general questions on managing. Is there a way to best manage battery life while on trail?
Yeah, so on your phone, Joe, you might actually be more of an expert on this, like especially on the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
I can just speak to it on the Android. So if you are using an Android device, turn your phone on airplane mode and turn it into put the battery efficiency mode on. And then make sure that the setting is such that the GPS only turns on when you turn the device, when you have the app on. And Joe, what is it with an iPhone? How do you maximize the battery life?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. Brightness, a lot of times brightness will auto readjust. So there's like a low power mode, which I always put it on. know that certain functions really drain battery, especially when you have limited cell connection. Like I've sometimes been on calls where I've lost like 15% battery in like 20 minutes because it's just been cold outside. Like especially when it's cold outside, your phone battery will die a lot quicker. And then using some of those high profile activities when you have spotty reception, or like I don't know this specifically, but I'm pretty sure your phone works harder to try to identify signal because it keeps going back in and out of signal. So exactly as Andrew said, putting it in airplane mode when you're not using it, or using your phone in points when you know you have good internet connection instead of kind of hiking for 5 miles trying to figure out information. Sometimes it's better to like make sure you have good service, stop and look and find the information you're looking for.
Okay, other questions about navigation, Joe?
Yeah, a few people have been recently bought in Garmin InReaches
Yeah.
and are curious, without much, they haven't really used them much before and are curious your take on them and what you should rely on them for.
Yeah, so this is, I'm actually gonna share my screen again. So there's a, let's see, it was earlier this year. I did a series on, how to navigate, and there's one whole page on equipment. It's part 3, and it walks you through kind of your options. And when you get to GPS, when you get to GPS, you've got all these different options. So you've got you've got 4 different options for GPS. You can have a GPS watch, you can do a smartphone with GPS app like Gaia, you can have a handheld GPS, or you can use your InReach. And I think that there's some pros and cons to all of those options. I think me personally, I like the smartphone with the GPS app. Like I think Gaia is just an awesome app. It's super user friendly. I get to use my phone, so all those swipe, pinch, zoom type of commands that you can do with your fingers. In contrast, like the GPS functionality on an InReach, especially like the InReach Explorer, I mean, it feels like you're back in it feels like 1995 again. It's this like low resolution screen. It's really small. They use a proprietary maps that aren't that, like, all the data is there, but they're just not that great. So anyway, so I would say, like, if you really want to get into it, like, pull up that page and kind of read it through and read it carefully, and that will kind of walk you through your options.
Great. And would you have any takes on like solar charging, solar?
Yeah. Thanks. I don't think I need to share my screen on this. So as far as like battery power, the best thing to do is to buy one of those like Anchor portable batteries and just charge your devices that way. Do not get like a solar charger thing unless you're going to be sitting in camp for like 12 hours a day. But like an Anchor, you've got like a 10. I can't remember how they measure it. It's like 10,000 millihertz. Joe, what's the?
I know it's like
It's MAH.
Yeah, it's something like yeah.
I'm not an electrical engineer, obviously. So it's like 10,000 of those things. It can charge up your phone like at least twice, maybe even 3 times, maybe like 2.5 times, and it weighs like 6 ounces or something. So you can charge up at night. It's awesome.
I use that that's what I used on the Appalachian Trails. Just
Mm-hmm.
like get into town, first thing you do is plug it in, and then you have battery for the next however many days.
Right. And I'll point out too, like, we're at the point now where you can charge, if you bring like a good battery pack, you can charge your phone, you can charge your headlamp, you can charge your InReach, you can charge your GPS watch, you can charge your Kindle. It's like, I mean, it's pretty slick that you can go out there and you don't have to bring a single AA or AAA battery.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I know this is for some people, it's like that's the way life has always been, backpacking. But I mean, I remember the days of like AAA batteries, and
I've begged batteries off of people on trail a few times, which I'm
I believe
ashamed
that.
to admit.
All right, let's keep on moving on then. And Joe, if you want to grab some more questions that come through, we can do that. So okay, so we're done with references. So the final thing is like fitness and skills. And so here's what I do, and here's what Joe does. We're both like avid runners. The difficulty with here, let me stop sharing my screen. So the difficulty for like physical training is that like the best way that you can train for hiking is by hiking. But who has like 8 hours a day to go hiking? So what you kind of need to do is find something Monday through Friday that you can do for like a half hour to an hour, and it's got to be higher intensity. So whether that be running, or whether it be like a HIIT workout, or maybe but it's going to be something kind of aerobic, something that's like works on power and strength and endurance. I don't think that like cycling is as good for training as like running is. It can be part of your training, but I wouldn't go there. So the key thing with the fitness part is just like make sure that your itinerary is appropriate for your fitness level. I don't have a great reference to tell you what that exactly looks like. Maybe I should work on that, but yeah, that's all I have to say. Joe, do you want to add anything about fitness, like gaining fitness before your trip?
Yeah, make sure you are, I guess there's two things about fitness, right? There's of course yourself and then the people you're hiking with. That's what I'm more concerned about because I can control my fitness and I usually know my limit. I oftentimes am most worried about other people not knowing their limit when hiking. So that's a big thing I look into for myself. I find like the stair steppers really useful. Going out and doing like test runs with your gear is just wildly useful. You're hiking, simulating the conditions you're doing, and also getting used to not only hiking, but for a lot of people, if you don't hike that often, you're going to put on a backpack that you've worn maybe once or twice, and you might get chafing, rubbing. You might realize your boots aren't the right fit. So part of it is fitness that can get you. And then part of it is just familiarity with actually the process of hiking itself.
Right. And then as far as the skills go, let me address this too. So skills are sort of like the black arts of backpacking. So it's really easy. It's really easy to just go buy gear, and you can pull out your credit card, and now you're like part of the club because you've got like a sweet kit. But skills are really what differentiates a really experienced backpacker from a new one. And there's actually a lot of skills that you can learn before you go out. Like if you're a new backpacker, there's like a ton of information online. So like, you can pull up like, okay, like, how do you poop outdoors? You can watch like fire starting videos. There are references on like how to hike in early season conditions. So like if you were gonna go up into Rocky Mountain National Park, say in June, like how would you deal with like water crossings and lingering snow? If you're gonna do like the High Sierra early in the season, where are all the big creek crossings? So all these skills that you can learn beforehand, including like navigation, how to set up your shelter, all of these different skills that you can learn. And as Joe mentioned, like if you're not really dialed in, the best thing to do is to pack up all your stuff and go for like a day hike, even just a couple of hours. And yeah, you'll learn if like, oh, my shoe is rubbing me the wrong way, or this backpack doesn't fit me properly, or I need a better way to pack my rain gear because burying it at the bottom of my pack does, like that proved to be costly. And then you can come back to your house, and in your backyard you can set up your shelter. You can make a meal on your stove. So you can sort of practice all of these things before it's real. I used to do a lot of that when I was still kind of trying to figure out how to do this. Like I'd be like, okay, like I'm going on a trip. It starts in March, and I'm up in northwestern Alaska, and temperatures could be 20 below zero. Is my sleeping bag going to be warm enough? And I would, the coldest nights here in Colorado, I would go out in the backyard in my sleeping bag with my sleeping pad and in my shelter and figure out if I was going to be okay. So there's a lot of like testing that you can do before your trip. Joe, any questions that coming through on this?
We posted your, thanks to Sarah for posting your high water creeks and
Yeah.
ford crossing link.
Right.
I don't know if you want to comment anything on top of that. Lindsay Wicker had a question. Do you have any resources for how to learn about crossing rivers?
I feel like I might have, let me see if I can pull, I feel like I might have, maybe a couple years ago written something about kind of like my approach. Yeah, here we go.
There is a blog post which we
yeah,
posted.
I think I just found it. Okay, so yeah, here it is. It's called High Water Gear and Skills for Hazardous Creek Crossings, and this will just give you some ideas. Like yes to trekking poles, no to rope, no to pack raft, no to river shoes, and then here's kind of the skills part. So how to time a creek crossing, how to look for alternates, how to like take a creek crossing and like break it down into like smaller tributaries so that you're not trying to cross like one big creek at a time. So like here's a good example where so you're on the John Muir Trail, and the summer crossing, this is Bear Creek. It crosses at the official crossings red dot here. But this gets to be a real difficult crossing after big winters in like June. So what you can do though, you can break it out, but you can take on each of these tributaries. So you cross the South Fork, you cross the East Fork, and those are going to be smaller creeks at that point. And then it's off trail, but it's be much safer crossing. And I feel like
I will make a quick note too from Logan. CMC is offering courses with these kind of like special interest skill sets. So that's something you can look out that CMC does offer.
Yeah, the backpacking section for all you CMC members or Coloradans that are not as familiar with the Colorado Mountain Club, we did add a entire section devoted to just backpacking, where whether you're a trip leader or just a participant, there's a whole list of handpicked backpacking trips, some of them famous and well known in Colorado, and others not so much. And you can sign up and go with the CMC.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. I think another good question, which I think this comes more like a gear question, but I think it was designed as a skill question coming from Joe Mitz, which is how important are paper maps on a trail like the AT if you have guides, gut hook, and inReach? So essentially, what kind of map reading skills do you need to have as a hiker? Oh, you're muted. No one can hear you, Andrew. You just look maniacally laughing. You're muted. Oh no, Andrew, unmute.
there
Oh,
you
there
go.
we go.
So I hiked the entire Appalachian Trail without a map in 2002. I just had the data book, and it was fine. But unfortunately, you feel like you're being led down the trail by like this very masochist like being, because you're just like, why am I going up and down all of these things? Can't we contour? So yeah, I mean the AT, like I guess, yeah, you can do the whole thing off your phone. I love paper maps. I think they're really reliable. There are a lot of advantages to a paper map over a phone. So like this would be like a small piece of paper for a map. Usually I use 11 by 17s. In comparison, like look at the amount of like the window size, if you will, right? So it's a much better viewing window. But you can definitely, like the established long distance trails, you can do them technically with just like gut hook. I don't think I'd recommend it. I don't think I would do it that way either. Joe, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I love maps. They're just
Yeah.
so much fun, especially afterwards, because I feel like I'm a lot more attached to the maps that have that like wear and tear on them.
Yeah. So actually, another thing that I'll add too. So this was an interesting, and I realize that we're getting tight on time here. So last year, I was running a 7-day trip in Yosemite, and at the last minute, I was able to get permits for a different area of the park. And I'd wanted to get these permits like months earlier, and they just weren't available. So at the very last minute, I switched to the group, and the paper maps that I had printed for this group weren't relevant anymore. We were in a totally different part of the parks, but everyone had the maps downloaded to their phones. and clients just on that 7-day trip just really didn't sort of develop a larger sense for where they were, and sort of were still struggling by the end of the trip to competently read a map. Just because I think that they were just working in it was just too small, this little device, and all these things were just kind of, I think it was a little too virtual. Whereas I think like a paper map, it becomes a little bit more tangible. And you can just see a lot of information, and the size, the scale doesn't change on it at all. So just a little anecdote. So let's go ahead and finish up, Joe. I'm just gonna take over here.
Perfect.
So to finish up, so here's like your final systems check, and as we've mentioned, like part of it is this shakedown idea of just like going into your backyard and like just working with your gear and figuring out things that you need to improve, or just sort of learning some skills in that way to make sure that like your first night out there isn't a disaster. And then as part of the systems check too, there's just this like final to do like before you walk out your front door. So like shut down the house. It's like putting the auto reply on your email, back up all your files, take care of house plants, forward the mail if you're going to be out for a really long time. You pick up all that perishable food like cheese and butter. You do a final pack up with all your gear, food, maps, permits. Put together like a travel kit if you're going to be on a plane, or even if you're just going to be driving like all day. It's nice when you get back to the car if you've got like a pair of flip-flops and a clean pair of underwear. It's awesome. And then the final thing to do is at this point in the planning process, you have a completed trip planner, and you leave that with your emergency contacts. And that way, if you're overdue, they've got some way to like kind of quickly hone in on where you might be. Joe, other questions that are coming through before we sort of close up for the night?
I think one that was an interesting one that someone had a while ago. Where is it? I'll just summarize it, which is what is a good place to find other like-minded backpackers? Like, how can you find backpacking community? Oh, come on, Andrew. Did I give you a curveball at the last second? Oh,
I mean,
he's freaking out.
I mean, what did he miss about the fact that I've walked like 30,000 miles by myself? I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know. Actually, there's some women are writing like a series on like how to backpack for women on my blog right now. And there was actually a post about this the other day that, and this woman described it as like, it's like dating. So you have to kind of put yourself in the right circumstance. So in her, like to find a hiking partner, you like, you look at the Colorado Mountain Club, maybe you like join a meetup group, or you find like a Facebook group, like, I don't know, like, Colorado Backpackers Facebook group. It doesn't exist probably, but something like that. You start going to these events, and you'll meet people that you like, and you'll meet people that you don't like, and you maybe invite someone that you like, hey, what do you think about going here like next month? And you sort of see if there's any potential in the relationship. So and then I'm just thinking of like this comment too. One of my guides, he's got a really good hiking buddy, and he said that at his age, so he was in his mid-50s. He said in his mid-50s that it was probably easier to find a wife than it was a good hiking partner. So he was just emphasizing the value of a good hiking buddy if you can find one.
That is official dating advice and hiking advice from Andrew Skurka.
There you go. All right, so I'm gonna just close out. I could hang out all night. Maybe we'll do this again. This was fun. I want to thank Joe. I want to thank you just for being our moderator and for offering some input. Logan, thank you for organizing this. Obviously, you did a knock-up job because we had a fantastic turnout. So thank you again. And for all of those who are still logged on in the audience, if you could kind of if you got a lot of value out of tonight, maybe considering if you're able to just drop a few bucks in the coffers of the Colorado Mountain Club so they can make it through our coronavirus era here and be strong on the other side. So thank you guys. And I guess the final thing, if I'm like a really accessible person. So if you have follow-up questions, just log on to my website. There's a little contact button on the upper right. In fact, it even gives you my email address. Send me an email and I will respond to you personally. So thanks for logging in tonight.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Andrew, yeah, the comments are pouring in. I don't know if you have them popped up on your side, but everyone's saying great job and really resourceful information. I was summarizing, and Joe and I had a little Google Doc going, and I was summarizing some of the links and tools that were mentioned. And I will definitely include that in the email, like I said in the chat, as well as I'll put the recording of this whole presentation. So if you saw a certain slide or something and we moved on, you'll be able to pause it on YouTube and take your notes. So expect that email hopefully tomorrow, no later than early next week.
Okay, good night, Logan.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you.
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe and have fun. Get on those trails.
Bye.